You're listening to Innovators by bcjobs.ca, Western Canada's largest job board. This podcast is about innovative companies with a focus on people. What sets them apart in terms of their leaders, company culture, and future outlook? As a business leader, what can you do to encourage innovation? As a recruiter, what can you do to adopt an innovative corporate culture? And as a job candidate, what can you do to stand out?
Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Simon, and I'll be your host for today's episode with Spare. Spare is an on-demand micro-transit company, kind of like the Ubers of the world. Joining us today is Erin Girard, People and Talent Lead at Spare Labs. Prior to Spare Labs, Erin spent a lot of time at various different companies like Lush, Toyota, Hayes, and even SFU and SNC Lavalin. Erin, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to let you talk a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started with Spare Labs and your background.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Simon. I'm excited to be here. So yeah, I've worked at a couple of different companies, primarily in the recruitment space. Joined Spare about 6 months ago. Never had an interest in public transportation whatsoever, but after starting, but after starting at Spare, I really started to realize that a lot of my decisions that I had made in my life about where I went to university, where I lived, even where I traveled, had a lot of impact or were impacted a lot by public transportation. So I started to really dive into that and understand that a bit more. And it does really impact everything that we do on a day-to-day basis. And that's one of the things that we are really trying to change at Spare and trying to innovate on is how public transportation really touches everyone and how we can make that more accessible to everyone, including people in lower income areas, outskirts, outer suburbs, smaller towns, and with paratransit for the elderly and people with disabilities. So a lot of different things that we're doing right now at Spare, and we're really excited to tell you all about them.
Wow, sounds like a lot of different projects that you guys are working on. I'm sure we're going to get into all the different projects and about Spare itself. Wanted to get to know you as a person a little bit more. You mentioned you love to travel and you've been to a lot of different places. I hear you also spent some time in Australia as well. Tell us a little bit about how you started at Spare. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your time in Australia as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I guess we can go all the way back to university. When I was in university, I wanted to do a study abroad semester. I looked at a few different places, and Australia was one of the ones that stuck out to me. But their semester system is almost the opposite of North America. So it would have taken me quite a lot longer to graduate if I had done that. So I tabled it for a while. Right at the end of my university degree, I went to Europe. And lo and behold, in Europe, there are a lot of Australians. Um, so there I was in Europe, surrounded by a ton of Australians, and had the opportunity to really get to know them a lot better and made some really great friends. So at the end of university, after I finished my last semester, and I didn't really want to start my life in the real world, I decided to hop on a plane and run away to Australia. So I traveled for about 5 months in Australia, a month in New Zealand, traveled around Southeast Asia, and then came back to Canada to actually walk across the stage and do graduation. Still didn't want to start real life, so I went back to Australia.
And there you spent, how long were you there for?
Total 2 years, but for the last leg of my trip, I was there almost a year and a half. So what is not on my LinkedIn is I actually did 4 months of farm work, working in kind of the middle of nowhere. The closest town was an hour drive. So I did my farm work there with my cousins who were Australian. So that allowed me to get my second year visa and work for a year in Australia, a second year in Australia. The thing with that visa, as I was saying to you earlier, is you can only work for one employer for 6 months. So I started working at Hayes, which is a recruitment agency. I was there for 6 months and then moved to Toyota as they shut down their manufacturing across Australia. So we were repositioning some of the roles in that area. So it was a really interesting experience to be able to fill some of the main gaps that were left over from the manufacturing being shut down and even hire back some manufacturing staff into roles like purchasing and marketing and things like that. Um, I can go on and on about that. Toyota was a great employer and they re-educated everyone in manufacturing before shutting it down. So a lot of great things to say there. But then I went traveling for a little bit and came back to Canada, and knew that I wanted to get into tech. So I worked at a company formerly called Easy Market, now called Intivio, working in dental software. Not as exciting as transportation, I can tell you that.
And you spent a little bit of time at Lush, and then now you're here at Spare Labs. How did you get started there? Tell us about your journey there. Did you network yourself into Spare Labs? And yeah, just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, good question. You're absolutely right. I did network myself into Spare Labs. I had been working at Lush and working in the manufacturing team and really wanted to go back into software. I just love the software space. I love how innovative it is. Everyone, it works so autonomously and is really passionate about what they do, no matter what that is. So I wanted to be back in the tech space. I had a mentor who I reached out to, and said, you know what, I really want to be back in the tech space. She works in the tech space. We had a few conversations, and then she actually reached out to me and said, I know someone who's looking for a people and talent lead. Would you be interested? And at the time at Lush, I was working 10, 11, 12-hour days. I was working outside of the city, so I couldn't come in for an interview. And Spare worked around my schedule. They met me at 5 o'clock on a Friday night, interviewed me, basically had an hour interview and then an hour just chit chat until almost 7 o'clock at night on a Friday, which was really nice of them. I walked in, I had just worked 10 hours, I was covered in glitter, I'd been at an event, I was like not in a great headspace, but they were really lovely, and yeah, we went through the interview process, and I wasn't entirely sure that I was ready to jump back into another role where I'd have to take on a lot of this responsibility. I actually was going to become a barista, and they kind of convinced me based on the fact that in our offices we have a really good espresso machine. So they basically convinced me that I could do both. Learn how to make a really good cup of coffee and also work for them as a people and talent lead. So I did that. I haven't perfected my barista skills at this point, but I'll get there, I'm sure.
Well, cool. I'm going to throw you a curveball here. I know this podcast is called Innovators. Being in the space that you're in, quite an innovative space, I'd say. I wanted to get your take. What does being an innovator mean to you? And maybe you can give us some examples aside from Spare Labs itself being such an innovative company. Maybe something within your company that's innovative that maybe we don't know about as well.
I think innovation for me means doing something in a space that hasn't been done before or hasn't been done well. And regardless of whether or not other people think it will fail or succeed, you make the jump anyway. And I think that's definitely what Spare has done in terms of this, made the jump. I mean, even I have had conversations with people kind of saying, oh, it won't work in this country, it won't work in that country, and things like that. And our operations in Norway prove that it does, regardless of what country you work in. We're in Japan, we're in the US, Spain, Norway. So if you persevere and you push forward and you have a really innovative solution, a really innovative product, and other people aren't doing it, you can succeed.
I think this is a very good segue. Tell us a little bit about what Spare Labs does. I know we spoke earlier and you mentioned it was kind of like an Uber, but not really. Can you, for those that don't know who Spare Labs is, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a software as a service platform for public transit agencies primarily to run their on-demand microtransit services. That's a mouthful, but essentially what we do is we provide a platform for the public transit agency or any company who wants to run an Uber-like service. So they can use their current bus system to be able to pick riders up at either their location or at a designated stop, pool that ride with another rider, and get them where they need to go on demand. We have services that do this for your typical bus services, but we also provide services like non-emergency medical transportation and paratransit services as well.
So what does that mean? Does that mean that emergency vehicles can pick you up at a certain location and drop you off at a different location as well?
So it's non-emergency. So it's dedicated vehicles that are non-emergency vehicles that can pick you up and take you like to the hospital or to your appointments and things like that.
I see. Kind of competing against the taxi market and also like Uber, etc.
We can actually work with taxi companies as well. So we have an opportunity for taxis to work with us. They can integrate their fleets into our system. So we're open to, yeah, that as well. We're one of those companies who really just wants to provide a better service, and anyone that wants to integrate with us essentially can do so.
Wow, that sounds very cool. Well, during COVID, most businesses got hit. I'm guessing the taxi industry and also your industry also got hit. With COVID now slowing down and kind of settling down, businesses reopening, many people are now turning their attention to what their futures look like and focus on business and talent. Can you talk a little bit about what your company, Spare Labs, has kind of gone through over the last 3 to 4 months, and what kinds of strategic initiatives do you have in place to ensure growth for Spare Labs into the future?
Yeah, we weren't honestly sure how we were going to be hit with COVID. It was obviously unprecedented times for everyone. What happened with us was, um, I mean, because people were on lockdown, because people were staying inside, and it was only essential services that were open, the decrease in ridership and the loss of revenue for public transportation agencies was huge. But the difference for cities that can use our service is that you don't need to forecast which transportation routes or which fixed routes should remain open. You can just let the people decide. So using the Spare app, the Spare platform, people can book whatever rides they need to get them to and from where they need to go, as opposed to having to figure out which routes should remain open and which ones should be closed to essentially save money. So that was one of the biggest things that we saw in areas that use on-demand transit, is that you could actually increase the areas that on-demand transit was in and utilize that as a resource during lockdown, so that you can get people to and from.
I know during COVID there was a huge push in eating from home. Was there a lot of partnerships or initiatives there on that side to partner up with these restaurants maybe that had to close down during COVID?
Yeah, we didn't do anything like that, but I've had a lot of questions around whether or not we can provide a service for employees getting to and from their organizations. It was something we were actually looking into at Lush, because there were a lot of employees who lived in areas like Coquitlam and Surrey, and because the office was in Vancouver, it was difficult to get to. So we were looking into options to how to get our employees there. And that's something that's been brought up to me a lot, in terms of what Spare can do. We absolutely can do things like that. The reason that we decided to focus on this niche of public transport is because of the lack of innovation in that area and the need for it. and providing that accessibility. So we didn't jump into the food delivery service yet, but we're adding lots of different services. So maybe it's on the horizon.
I guess with resources, we're always we have to pick and choose which kind of initiatives we want to roll out, and the one you chose is very important. And a lot of people are working remotely, right? And people are living pretty far from their office, so that's a very good initiative to have rolled out. This is a good segue as well. We wanted to talk about people and innovation. So you were mentioning getting workers to and from the workplace and to their home. A lot of successful people talk about the importance of people, and I'm sure at Spare Labs, people are very important as well. When it comes to people and as a recruitment lead, how do you approach managing people? And more specifically, during the recruitment process, how do you choose the right people that blends well with your corporate culture?
I think you're absolutely right in terms of the importance of people. And just back on the COVID train, I guess one of the things that we did during COVID was we delivered all desk and workstation setup to our employees. So monitors, chairs, anything that they needed in order to work effectively from home. We delivered that mid-March when everything shut down. So my coworker Nicholas and I drove around Vancouver and delivered everything that people needed in order to set up their workspace, delivered it to them. So yes, I agree. People are very important to the success of an organization. I think for us, in terms of managing people and how we recruit, one of the I would say there are two biggest things for us: people who are interested in what we do, because it does. There's a lot to know. There's a lot to know about public transportation. There's a lot to know about the space, and you can really dive deep into what we do, and having an interest in that and a passion for that is so important to the success of our business and the success of each individual person in each individual role. And then the second thing is the ability to let our people be autonomous. We have a very flat structure and we have a pretty interesting setup where most people are in charge of their own department and or their own territory if it comes to sales, or their own features in terms of the engineering team. So people are very important because they are responsible for an entire aspect of the organization and making sure that that runs smoothly. So we try and make sure that we're hiring people who are quite independent, self-starters, push for innovation and cross-organization collaboration as well. So people who will be not afraid to reach out to someone else and say, "Hey, this doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain it?" Or, "Hey, I have an idea about how we can change this. It's not maybe my area of expertise, but I'd like to chat about it." So I think that's one of the biggest things that we find with recruitment is the importance of being passionate about what we do and being able to be autonomous and take full responsibility of a particular area.
You mentioned the flat structure that you guys have, and that's part of the reason why you've been able to maintain such an innovative culture and do what you guys are doing, innovating in such a niche space. So much of that relies on the leaders of the organization and how the leader encourages innovations. Do you have any examples of that? Any cool stories that you can share?
Um, yeah, I think actually I just learned this, so I might not get the specifics right, but one of the reasons that we went into paratransit is because our operations manager, or for SaaS lingo, our customer success manager, essentially said there's this need for paratransit because what they're doing in paratransit is it's just so underserviced, and it tends to be the area that needs the most flexibility, the highest level of service, and it's really not serviced that well. There aren't a lot of companies that work in paratransit either. So he essentially pushed to have us move into the paratransit space. And not only does it fit with our values of providing accessibility and things like that, it has proven to actually fit quite well with what we do, and it has been working really well. So I think the ability for someone to just say, we should try this, here's my idea, and then to be able to run with that as an organization is really cool.
It sounds like a very that's a great story actually of someone bringing up an idea and then the entire leadership team kind of rallying around that person's idea. Some of the other things that innovative companies do very well, aside from having a flat structure, is we were doing some research with the Harvard Business Review and found that some of the other things that we look for at innovative companies includes tolerance for failure, freedom of speech, like you kind of mentioned, and highly collaborative. Despite the fact that innovative cultures are desirable, they are often very hard to create and sustain. Is there some examples of these areas? You don't have to mention all these different areas. Some examples of that Spare Labs has excelled in when developing such a innovative or maybe even fun culture.
Absolutely. I think you're right. The collaborative, highly collaborative environments are the best to work in. Those that have a tolerance for failure and freedom of speech, absolutely. I think one of my favorite things to share is, I'm sure the leadership team won't love this, but the amount of times that they failed in the beginning all led to here, right? So they tried a few different things and they didn't succeed at them, and they pivoted and decided kind of where the best niche was for them, and they got to where we are today. So I think Spare grew out of that willingness to fail, willingness to experiment, and tolerance for failure. So that is one of the things that we highly regard, is trial and error, and being able to try something new and run with it. Freedom of speech as well, like you mentioned, I think is a lot easier to do with flat structures. I talk to our CEO pretty much on a daily basis. So it's quite easy to have that open flow of communication. And I think most of the other team members feel the same way, just because it is such a flat structure and you really can, and especially with the tools that we have today with Slack and Zoom, we use Tandem as well. It's easy to just hop on a call with anyone and ask a question or make a suggestion. The leadership team definitely pushes you to, if you make a suggestion, build out a solution for it and then share it with them. So it's not just, offhand comments and things like that. It's definitely, you have to come with that initiative to build that solution and bring that to them, which is actually, yeah, quite empowering.
How has Spare maintained that kind of collaborative culture during this time of social distancing and COVID? You mentioned a couple of platforms like Zoom, for example. Are you doing a lot of brainstorming sessions, or what kind of initiatives are you guys rolling out within the company to ensure that the very collaborative culture is sustained throughout this period of time?
Yeah, good question. So we do use tools like that. It's definitely hard to maintain that sense of organization or that sense of collaboration when you're not necessarily seeing each other face to face. We have done a few different things. Some of them have been organic, some of them have been on purpose. One of the most organic things that we have done is, when we were in the office, we did a daily stand up where we would essentially go through the list of things that were on our plate for that day. We were doing this as well when COVID hit. We just moved it all to Zoom. We were still going through everything that we were doing that day, kind of like a laundry list of items that we had to do. And then at a certain point, we realized that, you know, people were losing that connection and that casual conversation that you have at the coffee machine or as you pass each other by your desks and things like that. So the stand up, at least for our team, the team that I'm a part of, transitioned into more of a collaboration, recognition, casual chat ability, rather than just listing out all the things that we're doing for that day. So that was one of the more organic changes that we made. In terms of the purposeful changes, or the things that we do to make sure that we maintain that collaboration, is having workshops for different teams and cross organization to brainstorm and rethink entire segments of the industry that we operate in. So bringing everyone in together. We do bi-weekly show and tells as well, where the entire company gets together over Zoom, of course, and showcases the things that they've been working on. So if one person, say in the engineering team, showcases what they've been working on, and someone in the sales team has a question about it, and that's something that hadn't been thought of in the engineering team when they were doing their sprints, that can be incorporated. And then even if there's something that someone is stuck on, they can bring that to the table and brainstorm with the rest of the organization on what that is or what a possible solution can be. I have one story about that. Is we did a show and tell a few weeks ago, or maybe it was probably 2 months ago now, a while ago, where we were trying to figure out how to communicate one timing. It's hard to explain. We were trying to figure out how to communicate something really simplistically in the app on how long it would take for a bus to get there, or how long it would take for the person to get picked up. And what we had at the time was pretty vague. It could have been probably understood in a few different ways, or it could have been interpreted in a few different ways. So then the question came up, does this button or the words that we have here, does it really make sense for this? What could we do? And I was actually listening on the call with my headphones, but I was outside doing a workout because I wasn't going to have time for the rest of the day, and I was working a lot, like back-to-back meetings and stuff like that for the rest of the day. So I was outside doing a quick workout, and I popped on the call and I said, wouldn't it just be easy to put this? And I don't even know if anybody knew that it was me that had said it, but it was just like aha moment that this is the way that the button should be laid out. And it just made perfect sense to do it that way. But it was an engineer who was showcasing the changes. It was a salesperson who asked the question about the confusion with the button. And then I piped in and kind of asked if it would make sense to have a certain word there. So that was a really collaborative effort. And the fact that it is a set time is very structured, but then the fact that anybody can join if they would like, and you don't have to if you don't want to, is very organic. So I think it's a mix of both.
I'm going to switch gears here. That's a fantastic story. Most of the users here on bcjobs.ca are candidates, and they range from marketing, IT, sales, and accounting. As an innovative company, of course, you want the best candidates to join your company. When you look around the company, maybe you walk through the office, maybe not now during COVID, but when you walk through the office, what type of candidates are usually successful and and they make it through your tough interview process?
I would say, just looping back on what I said before with that passion for public transit and that passion for accessibility and making things easier, you can definitely see that in the office. There's always the communication around that, which is really great to see because, I mean, you don't see that a lot in organizations, that people take a product or a service that you're offering and really have a passion for it. So everyone at Spare has a passion for what we do, which is one of the main things that we see. And then the other probably goes back to that, what you said before about, I think, open feedback or being able to give feedback or freedom of speech, the ability just to be open with each other and give feedback and be really honest about it and give suggestions and things like that is another aspect that I think makes people really successful. We have a few different ways that we've done that in the past. We had a recognition platform that went through Slack that also had a feedback portion as well. So you can request for someone else to give you feedback, and you can also give praise or positive recognition to someone as well. And that has been used quite heavily to acknowledge people for amazing things that they've done, and to make suggestions for the future or for potential changes and things like that. And that's been really successful, specifically in our team. So, yeah, I think definitely a passion for public transport, a passion for what we do, and an openness and willingness to learn, give feedback, receive feedback. I think those make people successful.
So, how do you test for that as a recruiter? Let's say I'm interested in working at Spare Labs, and I apply and I make it to the first round interview. What kind of questions or tests are you likely to ask to test for passion or openness to receive feedback?
This is something that I love talking about, and I could probably talk your ear off about it, but I'll keep it pretty short, because excitement for the position in the company is something that I talk about a lot, and I always try and give that feedback to people. I've seen a lot of candidates or heard a lot of candidates who don't really know what it is the company does, or say essentially, oh, my skills match up with your job description, therefore I'm the best candidate for the role, and underestimate the importance of interest in the company and in the position. So I think for that one, it's really simple. I ask every single person what makes them interested in working at Spare. And if you can give me a really good reason about what makes you interested, then that's a huge plus. And it doesn't mean that you can't ask questions, and it doesn't mean that you can't try and understand what we do beforehand. In fact, I prefer that. But asking questions and showing interest and moving forward, are all pieces that make me know how interested that person is in what we're doing. And you can even take pieces of it and say, I'm not that interested in public transportation. I, Me as Erin, I am not either, or I wasn't. But I'm really interested in sustainability and accessibility, and I'm interested in those pieces that you're doing. So that's a really simple way that we look for that passion and excitement for what we do. And then in terms of taking feedback, we give feedback. So in the interview process, especially for the sales positions, in terms of role plays for SDR roles and in demos for AEs, we do give feedback in that interview and see how they take it on. So if they can take that feedback, utilize it, adjust, or even just accept it, that's always a positive sign. And then in other interviews, we do ask about times that they have received feedback or something that they're working on. And you really can see if somebody acknowledges that there is something that they're working on and they're working towards that, then that's always a great sign for being willing and open to grow and take that feedback on.
Well, speaking of growing, gonna shift gears one last time on you here.
Yeah, great segue.
Yeah, well, I took that word and I'm just going to go with it. COVID is slowing down now, and there's probably going to be a lot of push to use services like these micro transit services. For you, what do you think the next 4 to 5 months looks like for Spare? Can you give us any cool examples or initiatives that your organization is putting into place to ensure growth during and even post COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can take it back a little bit to pre-COVID. We spent a lot of time working on a great product. That's where we started, was building a product that really made sense in the market. And now we are looking to bring that product global. So where we're growing in terms of people, primarily in the sales team, but also in the engineering team to maintain that product and build new features, because we always want to be innovating. To bring it back to what the podcast is about. So our main growth will definitely be in the sales team and the engineering team. I would say we have cool projects on the horizon, but we always have cool projects on the horizon. There are always new features that we're launching, different things that we're working on. We have a pretty extensive roadmap. One of the things that I'm really excited about is expanding into different parts of Europe and essentially taking a country from having no spare presence whatsoever to being the on-demand microtransit service in that country. So that's the thing that I'm really excited about, because it'll be interesting to see how it grows from 0 to 100 in one particular area.
That's really exciting. Any kind of cool campaigns that you guys are going to be launching in Europe to ensure growth there?
Yeah, we need a marketing person for that in terms of campaigns, but we'll definitely get there.
Well, we're going to close off the podcast here. Wanted to open the floor to you to talk about anything you want. It could be a cool campaign, like you mentioned, the one in Europe, or anything else that you're working on personally or even in collaboration with another organization.
There are so many things that have been in the works and in talks. We have talked about doing hackathons, potentially working with other companies to do web hackathons. But I definitely think the biggest things in the works for us are expanding primarily in North America and in Europe, and bringing on people to take on some really cool initiatives in their respective countries. Some of those things in North America are working in smaller cities and smaller towns to bring on an actual service in that area versus the very limited services that they have. And then again, just moving more into the paratransit space. Many people don't realize what paratransit is, and that it is incredibly important for certain demographics. And nothing has really happened in that space for so long. So taking our product, looking at the bigger picture, seeing where we can help and where we can move into in order to provide that level of service to everyone and that accessibility to everyone. I think that is a big feat, a big project for us, but definitely something on the horizon that we're working towards. It might not be 6 months, we'll take over the world, but 10-year plan.
When, just for the audience members that are curious, when is this plan to expand to Europe? A lot of our visitors on our website are international. I wouldn't say a lot, but there is a large portion there. If they're interested, when can they expect to learn more about it?
Yeah, so now we are launched in Europe. We have services in Norway and Spain at the moment, and we're looking into the DACH region, which is Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. So we are hiring in Europe right now. Absolutely.
Well, there you have it. I will leave it there for now. For everybody that has tuned in, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take care, be safe, and consider checking out sparelabs.com for their expansion in Europe and around the world. Thanks so much for joining us today, Erin.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Simon. It's been a pleasure.
Hello, everyone. This is Simon, Vice President of bcjobs.ca. BC Jobs is used by hundreds of recruiters and over 200,000 candidates per month. We also run career fairs to help support the jobs market. We regularly run career fairs both in person and virtually, with up to 400 candidates per career fair. Visit bcjobs.ca to discover jobs locally and remote.